Hey everybody, thanks for coming down the shore. So in a previous video, I showed you how to make no-knead peasant bread because it was quick and easy. Well, I've got something even better. What if I told you that you don't need an oven to make homemade bread? Well, today I'm going to show you how to make the most delicious and fluffy homemade bread in your crock pot. It's simple, requires minimal effort, and the results are amazing and you won't believe it. So let's get started. So this recipe is super easy and you can do it in just a couple hours. What you're going to need to do is put parchment paper in your crock pot, or if you call it a slow cooker, same thing, so that you can put the bread in the parchment paper. It'll make it easier to lift out when it's all done. But for now, what you're going to need is a large mixing bowl, and if you have one of these dough whisks, they work great. Other than that, I would use a fork, probably make it easier to stir this. If you have a stand mixer, you can also use that, but I figured I'd show you the hard way of doing this because it's still super easy. So what you're going to do is add 2.5 cups of bread flour. Now, unfortunately, I don't have any bread flour right now, but this is all-purpose flour. This is all-purpose flour, but it'll still work the same. And then what you're going to do is add 1.5 teaspoons of active dry yeast. And if you want to pre-proof this, you can by adding the 1.5 teaspoons of yeast to a little bit of water and let it sit for 10 minutes, and then you'll know that your yeast is good. But this came out of the freezer, so I know it's good. And then we're going to add 1.5 teaspoons of salt. So this is a 1/2 teaspoon of salt and a teaspoon, and that was kosher salt. And then we're going to add in 1 cup of lukewarm water, or it's about 110 degrees. And we're going to mix it all together until it's well combined. And it's going to be a sticky dough. Now, if it's too dry, you might have to add in like another tablespoon of lukewarm water. Now, if you use all-purpose flour instead of bread flour, the bread isn't going to be as dense. So see how sticky this dough is? That's a good thing. I'm just going to go in there with my hands real quick and just make sure that all of the dough is incorporated. Oops. And I'm a messy baker. So I actually think this isn't sticky enough, so I'm going to add in another tablespoon of lukewarm water. So that is the stickiness that we want. We want this to be sticky. So I'm just going to cover this with a tea towel, or you can use plastic wrap, and then put this in a warm area for 1 hour. So I'll see you back here in an hour. Okay, it's been an hour and the dough has risen. So now what I'm going to do is just put some flour down, and we're going to shape the dough. And like I said before, I already have the crock pot set up with the parchment paper, so we don't have to worry about prepping that. And what we're going to do is shape this into a nice firm dough ball. We want to remove all the air pockets. We want to give it some stretch. Basically, you turn it a quarter, roll it with your fingers underneath, turn it a quarter, put your hands underneath and tuck it, and keep doing that until you get a nice stretch on your ball of dough. I think that looks pretty good. So now we're just going to put this into the slow cooker. I'm going to score the bread before we bake this in the crock pot, so I'll bring you over so you can get a closer look. Okay, so to score this, you're just going to use a razor blade or a very sharp knife, and you're just going to cut into it. And this doesn't just make it look pretty, it also helps the dough, well, it helps the bread bake all the way through. So there you go, nice and scored. So now that we've scored the bread, we're going to put the lid on it. We're going to turn it on. We're going to bake it on high for 2 hours, and we're going to vent the lid every half an hour so that the texture is right on the bread when it's all done. Now you'll know the bread is done when the internal temperature is between 200 and 210, or if you tap the loaf, if you hear a hollow sound, then it's done. So I'll see you in 2 hours. Okay, so the timer's gone off. It's been 2 hours and I checked the bread and it is done. It's registering about 206 degrees, and when you thump it, it sounds like it's done. So what I'm gonna do is take it out of the crock pot, put it on this wire rack and let it cool completely, probably about between 20 minutes and an hour. So let me get it out first. Hot, hot, hot. Let me bring you over here so you can see it doesn't have, it is done, but it doesn't have a very dark crust on it. It does underneath, but not on top. So let me come show you. So as you can see, the bread is not very toasted on top. Man, that's hot. But it is underneath. Whew, hot, hot, hot. So we're gonna let this cool and we'll come back and we'll slice it open and we'll see how it tastes. Okay, so it's been an hour and the bread is finally at room temperature. So I'm going to go ahead and cut it open. I think I'm gonna cut it right down the middle so you guys can see how dense it is. And again, oh yeah, see, that's pretty nice. And again, if you want a darker crust, you could have cooked this longer in the crock pot. Just remember that mine was starting to get a little brown at the bottom as opposed to the top. So your crock pot might be different. You'll just have to play around with how long you actually bake it for in the crock pot. So I'm going to bring you guys down here and show you the slice, the density of the bread, and then we'll put some butter on it and I'll give it a taste. That crust is not too dense. There's some air pockets in there, so that's good. And like I said, the top of the crust is not that dark, but the bottom is mediocre golden brown. So that is our crock pot bread. And I cut into this slice. You can see that the bottom of it is more dark than the top. So I'm gonna put some butter on it. We'll give it a taste. Okay, I'm just gonna add some butter to this bread. To me, it looks like just regular white sandwich bread. And that's what it tastes like. If you toasted this up, it would make really great breakfast toast. But it tastes like regular sandwich bread toast. Well, it tastes like regular sandwich bread bread. You could make a sandwich out of this. Just cut the slices a little thicker. Or you could put like some garlic powder on this or something and have it with an Italian dish. So you could have this for dinner, again, like the peasant bread recipe I have, in about 3 hours. This is a pretty darn good recipe. I will absolutely make this again if I'm craving bread for dinner one night and I don't have any pre-made. I'll definitely do this again. It only took me maybe 5 minutes to mix all the ingredients, 1 hour for it to sit and rise, and then 2 hours to bake it in the crock pot. So there you have it, a tasty, delicious, and fluffy crock pot homemade bread. So if you found this recipe helpful, then check out this playlist over here. It is my homemade bread playlist, and I have a peasant bread and an Irish soda bread recipe in there as well. I'll have a new video for another bread recipe coming up soon. So until then, keep striving to be more self-sufficient, and I'll see you on the next video.